Thank you, Ivy, for live streaming. And there's Dan. Morning, Dan.
Good morning.
Dan, we've missed you. I feel like I haven't seen you or heard you for a while.
I've been busy.
Yeah.
Busy. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to see you. I'm glad you're well.
Likewise. Yeah, thank you. And sorry for joining a minute or so late, folks. I always have issues with Zoom. So I'm here now.
We're glad you're here. And now Aaron is joining. And so I think Dan and Kelly, once we get Aaron on, I think you guys, we're live streaming, so turn it over to you guys to kick off the meeting.
Okay, great. Hey, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. Unfortunately, I know Kelly wasn't able to join today. I see her logged in. Is Kelly able to participate?
She's here just on her phone, Dan.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, hi, Dan. I'm here.
Okay, I see you now. Hey, just want to welcome everyone. Glad that we could all come together. We've got an exciting, robust agenda today. And so really interested and looking forward to our conversation around our agenda items that we'll go through in a minute. I'll just remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed. For those that don't know me and those joining via live stream, I'm Dan Shively. I'm the Forest Service non-voting representative to the OWEB board. And together with Kelly Coates, we co-chair OWEB's DEI committee. So I'll turn it over to you, Kelly, and have you introduce yourself, and we'll continue to go through the flow of show here for the agenda this morning.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Kelly Coates, and I am the tribal representative on the OWEB board.
And then I can kick off the staff introductions. I'm Courtney Schaff. I'm OWEB's monitoring and reporting program manager and the staff lead for the board committee. And I will pass it to Stephanie.
Morning, everybody. Stephanie Page, Deputy Director, OWEB, and I'll pass it to Ken.
Morning, everybody. Ken Fetcho, OWEB's Effectiveness Monitoring Coordinator and Tribal Liaison. I'll pass it to Lisa.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Lisa Sharplow-Hansen, Executive Director with OWEB. And I will pass it to Eric Hartstein, and then we probably should go around the rest of the committee members as well.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Eric Hartstein, Board and Legislative Policy Coordinator. I was a couple minutes late, so I don't know which committee member has not actually been introduced. So
I'll jump in here, Eric. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Chris Allen. I represent the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on OWEB's board. And I'll pass it to Liza Jane.
Good morning. Thank you, Chris. I'm Liza J. McAllister, and I live in Northeast Oregon in Wallowa County, and I am the co-chair of OWEB board and represent the public at large.
And then how about Bruce?
Morning, I'm Bruce Buckmaster. I'm a member at large from Astoria, Oregon. And how about you, Aaron?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Curtis. I am the representative from the Bureau of Land Management, and I work in Portland, Oregon.
And I think we just missed Jesse and Ivy.
Good morning, everybody. Jessie Kirshner, Water and Climate Programs Coordinator here at OWEB.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Ivy Clark-Henry. I'm an administrative specialist with OWEB.
Did we get everyone, Courtney? Fantastic. Awesome, everyone. It's great to see familiar faces as well as new faces. And I missed, unfortunately, our last quarterly OWEB board meeting over in Tillamook. I unfortunately had to be at a meeting over in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So really regret that opportunity to have interacted with you all in person and meet some of our newer OWEB board members one-on-one. So let's take a look at our agenda. I think that's the next order of business. And hopefully you receive that all in the email from Courtney. We're going to do a check-in on the tribal assessment report with Ken leading that. We will next agenda item number 2 is OWEB staff sharing on their outreach efforts with new partners. That's Lisa and Stephanie. Our third item is next steps on the OWEB board equity statement. That will be Courtney and Eric. And then we'll open it up to public comment and topics for the next meeting. Before we do that, however, it would be good at this time, Courtney, if we can acknowledge whether or not any written public comment was provided in advance of today's meeting.
We do not have any written public comment and no one signed up for verbal public comment. So we will not have anything for agenda item on public comment.
Okay, great. So with that, unless there are any comments, concerns, or questions on the agenda itself, I believe we're set to launch right into the first agenda item. Courtney, you have your hand raised or your box is highlighted. I can't tell what that means.
I'm probably making noise. Well, I will turn it right over to Ken, and I'm going to share my screen and run Ken's PowerPoint for him. So take it away, Ken.
Thanks, Courtney. Good morning, board members. For the record, again, my name is Ken Fetcho. I'm OWEB's tribal liaison. And I just wanted to pause. I don't know, Lisa, did you want to say anything to kick this off before I dig into my presentation?
So I really appreciate Ken taking time to bring this back to us again. We've talked about it a couple times over the last year, but I think there's some really rich opportunity from the work that's been done here. And so Ken, why don't you just go ahead and go into it from there?
Thank you so much. We wanted to provide you guys an update on just where we are on, considering the recommendations that emerged from an assessment that was done in 2021 that looked at how our grant practices impact tribes. And so in order to do that, I thought it'd be important to provide some background on the purpose behind the assessment, how it was performed, and what we learned, because it's been a while. We last presented to the board in October of 21, and we have some new board members. Chris is here, Aaron, you're here, Dan, and I'm not sure if you saw that presentation, but we have, I just wanted to, in order for you guys to have a sense of what we're talking about, wanted to provide a little bit of background. So next slide, please. So, this assessment reviewed OWEB's grant practices to better understand if there are existing barriers that impact tribes' ability to apply for and receive grants that help them meet their watershed enhancement goals and objectives. Next slide, please. So in order to perform this assessment, we felt it was important to have a third party perform the review because we're just so close to this work. And sometimes there are barriers that we're just unable to see, frankly. So in order to do that, in 2020, sort of at the end of the year, OWEB successfully recruited a graduate student from Portland State University School of Public Policy to perform this assessment. And that student name was Allie Miller. And she and I worked closely on this project. She was the author on the report, and sort of the recommendations and the findings that she came up with was her work. And so she performed what we call a mixed methods assessment that used quantitative and qualitative data. And so the quantitative data came from our granting database and looked at the tribes who applied for and received grants from OWEB to understand what grant programs tribes are currently pursuing, and also how they are partnering on grants that others are the lead applicant on. And it's important to note that for this assessment, we focused on 3 of what we feel are kind of our most popular grant programs. The first one is open solicitation, which you guys know we have 2 offerings a year. And then there's the Focus Investment Partnership, which is becoming sort of our flagship grant program that's very popular and funds grants in a dedicated geographic area over 6 years. And then there's our small grant program, which is administered by 28 small grant teams that are spread across the state, and they're administered by watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, and tribes. And so then the qualitative data that came, that was incorporated into this assessment, came from interviews that Allie did with OWEB staff that are sort of grant project managers. And she also sat down with all 9 of the federally recognized tribes in Oregon and the Nez Perce tribe. And Allie interviewed the tribe's natural resources staff that were familiar with our grant programs. Next slide, please. So as Allie, was working through this and completed her assessment, there were we came up with this term, sort of tiers of engagement. So there's 3 ways in we identified that how tribes engage with our grant programs. So one is just the most obvious is they're a grant recipient, right? So they directly apply for and they receive either an open solicitation, a SIP or FIP. And SIP is just the program that preceded FIP. It was very similar. So it's Special Investment Partnership, and now the term is Focused Investment Partnership, or FIP, and then the small grant. Another way in which tribes engage with OWEB's grant programs is they partner with another organization that's the lead applicant and the grant recipient. And there's many ways in which tribes can be a grant partner. They can provide technical resources just to help inform, or let's say, a restoration design and approach, or they can actually provide cash or in-kind match to the project. And also they can be a sort of a subcontractor, so they can receive funds from the grantee to work on a part of the scope of work. And then finally, tribes can engage in OWEB's grant programs by sitting on a technical review team. And we have technical review teams for all 3 of those grant programs. Next slide, please. So there were 8 key themes that emerged from this assessment that Allie identified. And those 8 are listed here, but just because we have limited time, I'm just going to highlight a few, and those are those ones in bold there. And so the first one that we think it's important to just bring to your attention is that tribes told Allie that, quantity is not an indicator of grant practices quality. If you just look at how many grants that they apply for and receive, it's not really going to help evaluate OWEB's grant practices. And so they described that there are just a lot of factors that tribes consider before they decide to pursue different funding sources, including OWEB's funds. tribes will deliberate internally and then externally with partners to decide if they want to pursue OEB funds for a project. And so they typically strategize first on where to work and then pursue the appropriate funding source to implement the project. And what funds are pursued and who is the lead applicant is primarily related to location. So tribes will typically be the lead applicant if the project's on tribal lands or it is an area that has significant natural and cultural resource value to them. And another key theme sort of factor that dictates whether or not they will apply for OEB funds is that, you know, it takes time, effort, and organizational capacity to apply for OEB grants. And so sometimes, you know, the tribes have that capacity and time, and the project location is such that they want to be the lead applicant and apply for OEB funds. And other times they feel that the project is suitable and another organization has that capacity and time to pursue the OEB grant, and the tribes can participate as a partner. And then finally, what Allie wrote in her report that she felt the most predominant and pervasive theme from the interviews with the tribal staff was just how critical it is that history and geography be considered in watershed and natural resource management work. The ceded lands, and retained rights from the tribes that have treaties are binding, but often difficult for non-tribal partners to grasp and comprehend the importance of the tribe's spiritual and moral commitment to care for the land, plants, and animals. And as we know, there are also tribes who had never had their treaties ratified, and this has impacted the tribe's ability to access their lands. And it can also be difficult to ensure that tribes are included in regions where they are not always physically present. And so those are just some key themes that emerged. Again, we can provide this report to you guys if you are curious and looking at it for all the information, because I'm realizing, you know, again, we have new board members that actually haven't seen the report. So we can provide that if you're interested in looking at all the findings. And so the next, Courtney, if you could advance to the next slide, please. And so what I thought I'd do now is, after I sort of covered why we're doing this, how we did it, and some of the key themes that emerged, I want to brief you guys on the 6 challenges and barriers that were identified through these interviews with the tribes. So there's 3 on this slide and there's 3 on the next. So that first one is that OEB's language used in conservation easements can hinder a tribe's ability to place land from fee into federal trust status, which would allow greater sovereign management of a parcel of land. And so some tribes mentioned that they would like to access land acquisition funds for habitat protection without OEB holding a conservation easement on those lands. And again, it's important to note that, you know, there was 10 tribes that were interviewed, and these challenges and barriers were identified by all those conversations. Some of these, there was wide consensus, and some of those were only identified by a few tribes. It's important to include all of them. That second challenge and barrier is that match funding requirements can be challenging and burdensome to meet. And that third challenge and barrier, there is confusion and uncertainty about applying the federally negotiated indirect cost rate to estimate grant administrative expenses when developing budgets and grant applications. Some tribes are under the impression that federally negotiated indirect cost rates for tribes are above what OEB allows for grant agreements. Next slide, please. And then the next 3 that I'll go over. So fourth one, reporting on OEB Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Funds, or PCSRF, and ODF&W funds can be confusing and cumbersome. That 5th one, there are Measure 76 requirements that have not been well articulated, and it can be difficult to get a complete and accurate understanding of the state's constitutional requirements and definitions of what can and cannot be funded regarding natural resource management and cultural preservation. And the last one, staff from tribes just need additional time to work with their leadership and the tribal interviews were uncertain if OWEB staff factored this consideration into their work. Next slide, please. So those were the barriers that were identified in the report. And then there was a series of recommendations that Allie included in her report that came from the interviews with the tribes. So I just want to iterate that these recommendations are from the author and the tribes that emerged from this assessment. And they covered we've sort of bin them, or she binned them into 4 categories. Some of them fall into sort of administrative category. Some are related to communication. Some have a nexus towards funding considerations, and others are related to capacity. Next slide, please. So what I thought I'd do is just kind of give you a summary of what, after the report was finalized, what we've been doing. And so I kind of bulleted off a few key dates here that I thought was important. First was that one that Allie and I presented this report to the OWEB board back in October of 2021. And some of you may remember that. And others, like I said before, have just recently joined the board. And sort of the reason why I took some time to provide a little bit more information. And so then after that, after the new year and early of this year, I met with the executive team to discuss the report's recommendations and just sort of figure out how best to proceed. And so Lisa asked Eric Hartstein and Stephanie and I to meet separately to just go over all those barriers, challenges, and recommendations to prioritize those based on a variety of factors. And so over the next few months, Eric, Stephanie, and I would meet, and we spent an hour or two together talking about, which ones should be high, medium, or low. So those were sort of 3 priority categories that we had. And there was a total of 18 recommendations and barriers to address. And also sort of halfway through that prioritization process, it was important for us to meet with our internal DEI team, which is what we call the IDEA team. And so we also got feedback from all of the staff during that process. And then Eric and Stephanie and I sort of had a final prioritization that we shared with the executive team in August and September of this year. And we had a chance to talk with leadership about those. And then, one key decision that I think that was helpful for us to figure out next steps and start to implement some of these recommendations, where Lisa encouraged us to plan and host a tribal specific training to address the communication related recommendations. Some of these we feel we just sort of need to talk about with them and sort of do some trainings, if you will, and also be able to talk about maybe some of those other priorities, recommendations that came up while we're all together. And so now that I've kind of covered the timeline, I'd like to show you guys the high priority recommendations that emerged from that prioritization. And we can talk about a few next steps after that. And so there's, again, 3 on each slide here. So remember, there's a total of 18 recommendations and / barriers. Some barriers were identified, but there wasn't, in the report, there wasn't a recommendation. And so we felt it was important to include them all together so we're not missing something. And maybe we could come up with our own recommendation to address a barrier. And so the way it shook out was that we came up with 6 high, 6 medium, and 6 low priority recommendations. And we didn't do that on purpose. It's just sort of the way it shook out. And one thing I did on here, if you see an asterisk next to one of the numbers, we heard something very similar, or Echo Northwest, who's performing the DEI assessment, that we've hired a private contractor to assist us in better understanding that there's barriers to underserved and underrepresented communities. And so I included asterisk. We're hearing this through their effort as well, because I think it's important to keep in mind. And so those first three all have an asterisk. So it's something that others have talked about as well. And so that first one is there's confusion and uncertainty about applying the federally negotiated indirect cost rate to estimate grant administrative expenses when developing budgets in grant applications. There are Measure 76 requirements that have not been well articulated to tribes, and there's just uncertainty under, tribes would like more understanding on how those requirements can help them better understand projects that they should be proposing to OWEB, and maybe others that don't fit well with our funding requirements. And that third one is they'd like us to clarify eligible expenses included in grant funds and clarify that staff time is allowed to be included in grants. Next slide, please. And so those last three that are high priority include number 4, include project ranking criteria that is meaningful to the tribes and honors tribal knowledge and expertise, and incorporates tribal participation in grant application evaluation and project ranking criteria. Number 5, host and fund more opportunities for staff from both tribes and OWEB at all levels to connect and have discussions together at annual meetings, and to discuss grant program eligibility and application timelines, training opportunities, etc. And finally, number 6, which is something, again, we heard from others, is that match funding requirements can be challenging and burdensome to meet. And so next slide, please. Sort of my last slide is just sort of some next steps. So staff, we already have sort of like a small team of staff members that are discussing to plan for this tribal training. It hasn't been scheduled yet, and I hope to schedule that, after the new year and figure out a time in the winter or spring that works best for tribes, so that hopefully everybody can attend. But this training, we will incorporate existing training and resources that staff have already developed. So we have a lot of these training materials that are delivered in a variety of ways that we hope to incorporate. And we also, at this training, hope to hold a facilitated discussion around a few of the other barriers that were not identified in the high priority recommendations to make the most of our time together. And those last 2 bullets on the slide, as you guys know, we have Echo Northwest. They've been helping us perform an assessment of our grant practices and coming up with recommendations on how we can make our funding opportunities more widely accessible to all Oregonians. And so we feel like there's an opportunity to maybe integrate some of these communication efforts that we heard from the tribes, but also through this other assessment to have consistent communication messages and just help folks access our funds more equitably. And then finally, there's other recommendations and barriers out there, and we want to work with the executive team to identify and implement solutions for those that we won't be able to address through the training. And so last slide is just sort of a comment question slide to leave it open if you guys have any questions or comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, great presentation and overview. Let's hear from those with questions. And I see, Bruce, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Ken. Your 6 items that were on the last couple slides, or slides, 2 slides before your last slide. Looking at those, it looks to me like all of those are, except possibly number 6, are staff actions. They're decisions that staff will make on applying the grants and working with potential applicants. So I thought it was very informative. But as far as looking at board action and committee action down the road, am I correct in saying that only number 6 might require some board action?
So there is number 4 that speaks to project ranking criteria, and could also be need administrative rule change to be able to do, and that would ultimately require board approval. So I see it as 2, the match funding requirements. That actually is kind of being addressed now, and maybe Eric could talk about briefly. And then that project ranking criteria that is meaningful to tribes and incorporates tribal participation in grant the evaluation process. So I believe that would need a rule change as well. But we identified as high priority because we felt like those are important, but it's not necessarily that we can address through a training, but it's still something that emerged as a high priority.
Is Eric going to talk about some of the work in the Division 5 rulemaking that might get to a little bit of the matching piece, Eric? And then I think there are a couple of philosophical things we could talk about too.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and thanks for the question, Bruce. The match issue is one that we're going to be bringing to the board next month as you all consider revisions to the Division 5 or the broad OEB grant program rules. Currently, there's a 25% match requirement for all OEB grants, and we are putting forth a proposal that would eliminate that 25% match requirement and make it up to 25% match requirement for OEB grants, which would allow for grant types like stakeholder engagement, technical assistance, monitoring, where we know that applicants sometimes have difficulty getting or achieving that 25% match threshold, that we can lower that requirement even down to $1, while we're maintaining 25% match for things for that like restoration projects that are a little bit easier to meet that requirement.
So I want to keep us moving. This is a substantive topic, and we've got a couple others here this morning. Next up, we've got Kelly and then Chris. Kelly?
Thanks, Dan. Kelly Coates for the record. Great presentation, Ken. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the work that staff has put into this. I'm looking forward to the tribal training and kind of along Bruce's lines of thinking as well. I'm wondering how I can help or engage more as the tribal liaison as the tribal representative on the board, and help you guys move forward with this. I would definitely want to attend the training and just hear what tribes have to say, with the dialogue that will be had at that meeting. And then also, I just encourage you, when you're looking to schedule that, I know that a lot of, I know for me, my calendar, January is looking pretty booked already. So if we can get something out there or a couple of dates that might work, throw out a doodle poll to see what works best for folks, I think that would be great, because I'd love to get as much participation as possible in that meeting to continue that dialogue. But again, just thanks so much for your work around this.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kelly. Chris Allen. Good to see you, Chris.
Nice to see you too, Dan. It's been a while. Ken, yeah, thanks for that presentation. Super helpful for me. I had two questions. I think one may have been just answered by Kelly, but my first was how the recommendations, the 18 that you outlined, how they were prioritized. And was that, I guess I'm just curious whether that was based on some assessment of feasibility or impact. So curious about prioritization. And then my second question was, the tribal training that you referenced, I was unclear whether that was for OWEB staff and board members or whether that was tribal training, meant to benefit tribes, for the tribes, with the tribes. Sounds like from what Kelly said that it is tribal training with our tribal partners.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll cover that second one real quick. Yeah, so the training that we're still planning and have not scheduled yet, it'll still take us a while to plan it, Kelly, just so you know, so it won't be happening in January, probably late winter, early spring. But it's to help address those recommendations and barriers, to talk through some of the information that we heard from tribes during those interviews, and to help dig into some of those things that we heard about and work through and use sort of these training resources that we have to help in that manner. And then how were these prioritized? Really, we got two sort of guiding principles from Lisa. One is low hanging fruit, and the other is that if we do it, it'll benefit others. So if we kind of work out a way to address these recommendations that help improve tribes' access to our funding, it also benefit others down the road. And so that's sort of that guiding principles that we took as we worked through those.
Thanks, Ken,
All right.
and thanks, Chris, for the questions. We'll do one more question here. Ken, you've got a captive audience. Liza Jane next, and then we'll move on to our other topics unless, Lisa, we want to continue on this topic. Liza Jane.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Ken, thank you for this work. It's so important, and I feel like you're just doing it. Our staff's doing a great job with being inclusive and really putting big effort towards this. I'm wondering about something I saw on the number one. It was just listed number one as a challenge and barrier. And did I understand that there was a desire to acquire land without any conservation easement on it in grant programs?
Yeah, so what we have heard is that if there is a conservation easement attached to a land title or deed, that if they would like to take that land and go to the federal government and convert it to trust land, that they're unable to do that because of that sort of that stipulation on the property. And so some tribes mention that that can be a barrier to pursuing our land acquisition funds.
Do we do that for anyone? Anywhere else?
Go ahead, Lisa. You want to help me answer?
I'll try and help you. I wish we had Eric Williams or Miriam on the phone. But currently in Oregon law, the main tool when we're working through land acquisitions is a conservation easement. The federal government has another tool that is less restrictive, but it's not currently in Oregon law is how I understand this. So it's possible that there could be some other tools put in place, but it's also my understanding it might change, it might need a change in law. And I saw Courtney nodding, so I'm thinking I captured that correctly at a very high level.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
All right, and Lisa, did you have a question or do you want to wrap us up on this topic?
More of a wrap-up comment.
Okay.
So, I just want to thank Ken and staff for their work and really digging in here. I think they've done a great job of trying to find some things that we can prioritize and move forward on the staff side. And I know Bruce asked about board action. And I will tell you over the last year with this committee has been incredibly helpful in terms of asking us questions to do soul searching and to really look and dig deeper into our processes and think about accessibility and how we do our work. And so there are a couple other things that aren't necessarily tied directly to this assessment, but are things that we're thinking about and working at implementing here. So one initiative, just generally, Stephanie and I are really trying to do a lot around plain language, and plain language in the announcements that we're putting out. When we're putting out other information, trying to move away from some of those words of art that we're all comfortable with, but other people might not understand, so that it makes our work more easily acceptable and understandable. And then the other thing that's underway is there is a team right now at OWEB that are looking at our grant applications, our online grant system, and really looking at the questions that we're answering and where we're collecting the information and what we need to collect, and thinking about how we may streamline that as well. I think an example is we collect some information on the front side of our grant application to help us with our PCSRF reporting requirements, which are pretty hefty. That said, I think we're thinking about, do we have to collect that front side, or could we collect it after a grant is awarded to help with some of the ease in that application system? So one of the things that I want to say thank you and encourage all of you to do is keep asking those questions in terms of asking us to look inward to what we're doing, so that we can still keep credibility and rigor in our process, but open it up in terms of accessibility so it's more understandable to all people.
Fantastic. Thank you for that leader's intent, Lisa. Wonderful job, Ken. Hey, everyone, let's give Ken and all those that were connected to this body of work a virtual round of applause. Can we do that? All right. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So let's move along. Our next agenda item, let me find it here, bear with me, is for Lisa and Stephanie to provide an update on OWEB staff outreach efforts with our new partners. Roughly about 20 minutes there. Lisa?
So thanks for that handoff, Dan. I appreciate it. I'm going to just kind of put this at a high level, and then Stephanie is going to talk about more specifics. Early in 2022, one of the charges that came out of one of these meetings was meet 3 and go make efforts to meet 3 each quarter. And the team has taken that really to heart. And I've got to tell you, it has been one of the most rewarding parts of my job over the last year in terms of reaching out to new partners and identifying people that may have more interest in OWEB and not have realized that there's opportunity here to apply for grants, along with just generally meeting some pretty amazing people that are doing amazing things in the world. So again, I would say, thank you to the committee. And I think those were wise words of wisdom from one of our former members. It has been incredibly helpful as a guiding principle and been very, very useful in helping us think about that work. And so as all of you, come across organizations that are potential applicants, continue to feed those into us because we're making progress on our 3 or more per quarter. And also, I think one of the things after Stephanie talks about this quarter's meetings and some of the ones that we're now going back to, because these are not one and done conversations. These need to be an ongoing set of conversations. I think it would be good to try and figure out how we begin to incorporate maybe some of those partners coming and visiting with the board in the future during board meetings and building that relationship with all of you. They're meeting us as staff. We're doing the OWEB introduction to opportunities, but I think there's more for all of us to learn from some of these potential partners. So Steph, I'll let you go ahead and talk about some of the specifics in terms of our recent work.
Great. Good morning, everybody. So I'll start by mentioning an event that I've mentioned before because it provided a great jumping off point for a couple of the meetings that I'm going to talk about. And this is an effort that the governor's office recommended we start to participate in when we were looking for ideas a few months ago. There's an organization in the Portland metro area called Partners in Diversity, and really the goal is to broaden multicultural hiring opportunities for employers in the broader Portland metro area. They sponsor a networking event on a quarterly basis called Say Hey, and it's a chance for folks who are new to the Portland metro area, who want to expand community connections, to be able to meet other people. It's like really structured in a positive way. And yeah, I've really enjoyed attending the two events that I've been able to make it to. So at the first event that another colleague and I attended in August, I think it was, had the chance to meet the new executive director for Portland Audubon Society. And then Lisa and I had a follow-up meeting with him just to introduce OWEB and talk about possible areas for collaboration and to go through some of our grant programs. So that was one of the meetings that we had since the last DEI committee meeting. We also had a meet and greet with a few folks from Solve. And so some of you might be familiar with what Solve stands for, which is Stop Oregon Litter and Vandalism. Solve they've changed their name slightly, so it's spelled as you would traditionally see Solve to be spelled, just reflecting the broader mission of community engagement and broader environmental goals. So Lisa and I had a meeting with a couple of folks at Solve, and that was thanks to Nina DiConcini, who's the outgoing Northwest Region Administrator with DEQ. She's been on Solve's board and wanted to reconnect us with the organization. So we talked about possible areas for collaboration there, as well as potential additional partners for them. We had a meeting with Sustainable Northwest regarding their new regenerative ranching initiative. So we were able to meet the new coordinator for the program, who's located in Baker, I believe, and learn a little bit about the effort there. And so that's going to be rolling out in the next few months. And then finally, we had a meeting with Pew Charitable Trusts and learned about their Blue Carbon Initiative, as well as their Coastal Estuary Program. And that was thanks to a connection from a colleague at the Oregon Department of State Lands. So Lisa was a part of that conversation, and Jesse was as well. So if either of you have any comments to add about that conversation, but we had an hour meet and greet with them. And I think we were really rushing to get through everything that was of mutual interest to our organizations. So that was 3+, I would say, for this quarter. I think we've got a couple new partners that we're meeting with in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have a report on those at the next DEI committee meeting. And then, as Lisa mentioned, we've got at least one repeat check-in coming up in the next few weeks as well. And I know I think I've sent information about the Say Hey networking events out to the board through April before, but yeah, especially those of you who are agency partners who are on the board, if you or folks within your agency are interested in participating, I'm glad to resend that information. If any of you in the Salem area would like to carpool to an event, I'm always trying to loop in other agency colleagues as I keep going to these events, because first of all, they're just a lot of fun, and it is a really great way to meet people at an event that they're already participating in.
Wonderful. Did you have more, Stephanie, or?
That's it.
The update.
I think
Great.
that's everything. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Exciting. It's always fun to meet new partners, and such an important part of the relationship aspect of it all. Hey, folks, questions for Stephanie and or Lisa and Bruce? Your hand is up. Go
Thanks,
Bruce.
Thanks, Dan. I am excited, supportive, and a little envious of this outreach program. When I heard about the Pew meeting, I smiled because I'm familiar with the work they do. Just so you don't run out of potential people to buttonhole down the road. I believe the Oregon Global Warming Commission had meetings with environmental justice leaders around 2020 during their natural and working lands proposal out. They had an outreach period. Maybe it might be beneficial to reach out to them and see who is on that list and if they should be added to your list to keep you busy. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce. I've got kind of a list of future folks to reach out to that I've been keeping together with the log of outreach that we've done. So I'll add that note. And I did think of one more thing that I wanted to be sure and mention. We might have mentioned it at the last DEI committee meeting as well. And this is more of a government to government update. But I wanted to note that Lisa and I finished meeting an initial round of meetings with all of the federally recognized tribes in Oregon, as well as the Nez Perce tribe. So that had been a goal of Lisa's to complete initial meet and greets during the first year. And again, it was a really wonderful experience. We learned a lot about tribes' history, about areas of interest within the state, and then as well as a lot of different initiatives that tribes have going on, and again, opportunities for collaboration going forward. So we look forward to continuing those conversations into the new year.
Fantastic, Stephanie. Was that a mix of meeting with tribal council leaders and staff? Or
it was generally natural resources and forestry staff at tribes, or natural resource directors and forestry program directors. So I think one thing that we learned is that every tribe's natural resources programs are structured a little differently. Some of them are cultural and natural resources together. In some cases, fisheries and forestry are in different departments. So I think we just learned about a lot of different potential areas of overlap.
wonderful, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised for questions or comments. All right, a virtual round of applause for both Stephanie and Lisa. Thank you both. Hey, moving right along, let's move into our next agenda item, and that is next steps on the OWEB board equity statement. Courtney and Eric.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks. Well, I guess a first round of applause goes to Bruce. So at the last DEI and environmental justice meeting, we very briefly talked about the board equity statement that had been built by Eco Northwest based on an exercise we did at the board meeting in Enterprise, and discussed with the board the value of kind of the being consistent as a board. And we had a resolution related to climate, and so we decided to move the equity statement in that same format for consistency of the board. And at the same time, Bruce took a stab at doing some edits to the equity statement. So Eric Hartstein and I took both the climate resolution and took Bruce's edits to the equity statement and incorporated it into the current version that we sent out, as well as posted on OWEB's board as part of the meeting materials for this meeting today. So there's a couple approaches that we could have today. We could continue to kind of have the high level conversation this committee's had in the past and give Eric and I general feedback on the structure, the format of the current equity statement, and discuss next steps. Eric is ready and willing to pull up the document in a Word version if folks want to do some more detailed group wordsmithing. But it could also just be super beneficial today to have a high level conversation about the current status of the equity statement, things that you guys support, concerns you might have, things you would like to see either incorporated into it or definitions that you think would be important to be included. So just kind of open to hearing from the group about their thoughts on next steps before then we decide how to facilitate the conversation.
I'll kick it off, folks. Dan Shagley here, co-chair for the committee. I would appreciate the high level conversation rather than the deep dive at this time into particular wordsmithing and editing that can always bog down in committees. I'd like to hear if others are on board with that approach for this morning. Then we can kind of talk about next steps. I saw one thumbs up from Liza Jane, Bruce, others. Okay. Does that help, Courtney?
That's great. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So then just to jumping to the high level conversation, it looks like Kelly did have to jump off. She was going to lose cell phone coverage at some point in her trip this morning. She did share, because she knew she was going to have to fall off at some point, that she really appreciated the work Bruce put into the edits and liked the direction the equity statement was headed. So wanted to share that with this group. So I'd be interested in others that had a chance to review it. Your thoughts if you feel like we're headed in the right direction, if there are things that you feel like are missing or things that you think should be removed. And also Eric and I would be really interested in, we have a list of potential things that we think we need to define, but if there's other important words or concepts that you think would be important to be included as part of the definition section. So I think if we could get that kind of high level feedback from everyone today, Dan, that would really help us then at the conclusion of this conversation, talk about next steps with you.
Wonderful. Chris, why don't you go first?
Thanks, Dan. I think the document is looking great. I gave it a look yesterday and this morning and don't have much substantial comments on it, but it did bring up a question for me as to whether OWEB as a state agency, whether there are other state agencies, primarily thinking of natural resource agencies like Water Resources and ODFW that have developed similar equity statements. And I realize OWEB is unique in a granting agency, but I thought there may be some similarities with how other state agencies might look at developing such a statement. I'm wondering if that is something that we've looked into.
My recollection could be foggy, so Eric and Lisa help me. When we started down this path, we did reach out, and it appears that OWEB is kind of leading in this effort of creating an equity statement, and other agencies had not gotten to a point where they had board adopted equity statements. I'm seeing nods.
I would
As
just
always, we're ahead of the curve.
This is, really new and forward-leaning work that the board is doing here. The state has, several initiatives around equity and equity inclusion and a framework. But in terms of going as far as adopting an equity statement, this definitely is forward-leaning.
All right. Well, thanks, Courtney and Lisa.
Bruce. And then Liza Jane. I think that was the order. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I appreciate us getting beginning to put this in a resolution format. As I read it, I mean, there were grammar problems and there were some other issues in it. But I think outside of that, those things are easily fixed. Somewhere along the line, I think we need to take a step back, look at it and say, all right, how will this change our behavior at OWEB? I mean, just to make sure that it's, we're not checking a box here. How do we step back? I'm not comfortable yet with how we deal with our past actions, how we phrase the issue of what we have done wrong. I understand the importance of making amends as an individual as well as a group, but we have to be careful on how we phrase that. I think it needs to be more forward-looking than fitting a hair shirt for all of us. The last thing is I've got a document of definitions that Courtney and I'll be glad to send out to everybody with citations on it and where they've come from. And I'll try and get that out today, and hopefully that'll be a source of give you some information that might be helpful.
Thanks so much, Bruce. So, and just to clarify that I heard you correctly, Bruce, you think that we could do some more work on the section about past actions and kind of rewording it to be a little bit more forward thinking. And I think that's great. That's definitely a section of the document that the executive team and Eric and I had flagged that needs some work. So it's good to hear that from you.
Well, it seems like, part of this was plug and play as we pulled different things from different, and I mean, it's obvious as you look at it, how we got it together. And I think that's how you have to start. But we talk about BIPOC communities, and we're not limited. We're certainly not limited in our statement or resolution to just BIPOC communities. And goes on in other areas to talk about that. So there's that. So thank you. I think you understood what I was saying.
Yeah,
perfectly.
thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce. Liza Jane.
Thank you, Dan. This is not intended to rain or snow on any of this. This is a great start. Good work. Readable? Nope. I think, Lisa, you talked about plain language. I don't want to use that word. I just want to say that how does it benefit us to use whereas blah, blah, blah? I think if it's possible that could make, I just wish it was worded more authentically in a way that demonstrates a desire to own it and people to understand where we are than a lot of this. I also have just probably a personal relationship to the word traditional. And I see it in here in the same sentences of non-traditional and then traditional, and what's up with that? So maybe and I've read it several times. I haven't put my own red pen to it. So I look forward to that opportunity to back up what I'm complaining about here. And I fully intend to do that. I think there's just so much. For one, people now, a while back it was you had 30 seconds with people's attention, and then it was 15. It might be 7 or 3 now. And is that our intention, or do we want to put something out there that really is easy to digest? People won't leave at the second whereas when they're reading it. I really, if we're going to lead, let's lead in a way that's truly different and powerful than what's been done in the past. So That's some high level ideas for us to move forward. And thank you, Bruce. You did red pen. I want a red pen. I'd love to red pen with you, but let's keep working on this.
We love all your red pens.
Just a quick comment. Thanks, Liza Jane. Dan, forgive me. The whereases are not required for a resolution. So I don't think it's certainly necessary at all.
This is really good conversation, folks. Just the type of conversation I think we need. And I, for one, would like to call out just how difficult and challenging crafting a resolution. I mean, perhaps we call it a statement, not a resolution. It's hard work. It's hard to find the right words. It's hard to weave it all together. You start by pulling in pieces and then it looks fragmented. And how do you smooth those pieces and make it flow? How about others? I too, while we're waiting for other hands, Lisa's hand is up. I'll just finish by saying I found it difficult in terms of flow. I found several words that I got stuck on, couldn't get off of, and it, it sort of created that drag or pause. And I also acknowledge just how challenging this is. And I think it's exciting with OWEB being one of the leading state agency in the state of Oregon, crafting a statement and a resolution around this body of work, this way of doing business, right? And so, it is not just looking on the surface, perhaps to some, that it's a checking the box type effort or exercise. Lisa.
Thanks, Dan. So Bruce went off the screen and I was hoping to be able to phone a friend in terms of, okay, you're back. How long did it take to draft the climate resolution? I came in on the end of it last year when we did modifications, but I think there was painstaking months, if not over a year, really working through intent, et cetera, around the climate resolution.
It was well over a year, Lisa, and closer to 2, and sentence by sentence.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. I think that's, what we have on paper here is a starting place for us. What we received before was the beginning. And it's going to take us all some time to really dig in and think about what is important to OWEB in terms of the equity statement and how we approach it. So I encourage everybody, as you start thinking about taking the red pin to it, I think it's probably going to take more than once taking a red pin to it, given the experience that the board had working on the climate resolution, and some serious conversations around some specific pieces. So this will be coming back for a while, and I think is an ongoing piece of work to get there, just to kind of reinforce that to some of the points about form, style, et cetera. Form and style, I think, are the easy part to fix. The hard part is that deep intent.
Well put. Thank you, Lisa. Courtney or Eric, any other thoughts? Let's talk about next steps, right? Like, will it be helpful for you all to get, perhaps it's not red pen edits, but it's more comments, right? This kind of feedback you're getting now, does it make sense for you to take it back and rework, redraft? What are you thinking, Courtney?
So these are perfect and great comments for today. And I would appreciate anyone that wants to take some time to do some red penning, because all of those, I think it's going to be multiple iterations of red pens. What I think would work best, because as Lisa said, this is going to take some time. And I think this is the space with this group that we can have these continued conversations about it. And I don't want it to be rushed. I don't want us to feel like we're rushing towards an endpoint, because again, I think we want to do it well. We want to be thoughtful about it. I think it would work great if we heard from all of you, your comments, your red pens. Eric and I met and worked on it, and this group talked about it at our March committee meeting, and then talked about, at that point, once we've had some additional edits and time to revisit it, when would be a good time to bring it to the full board. But I think we need some more work and some more back and forth with this committee before we bring it to the full board. And I just, like, as we've all said, there's no reason to rush this because we want to do it well and we're on the leading edge. So would all of you be comfortable with that approach?
Let's switch it around. Anyone opposed to that approach? Please chime in or speak up.
Great.
I think you have consensus there.
We appreciate that, to make it not rushed, and so that we can hear from you guys, can take some time, give us some additional comments on this draft, and Eric and I can sit down, put our heads together, and then bring this group another draft ahead of the March committee meeting.
Wonderful. I'd like to put one more suggestion into the room here. And this may be, Liza Jane, touching on your point around the conventionality, right? We tend to think of resolutions, oh, it has to fit this template. And so my suggestion is going to be a little bit unconventional. And that is, before, we've acknowledged there will be multiple drafts, right? The committee will see it, probably multiple versions before it even goes to the full board. What do people think about getting some feedback on a draft when it's ready for review by some of the external partners that are going to pay close attention to the words in this resolution and statement, and just do some sensing? Doesn't have to be exhaustive, doesn't have to be extensive, but I often wonder, we may think we're getting it right on paper until it's released and others review it and evaluate it for the first time. Just food for thought. Wanted to put that in the room.
Thanks, Dan.
Liza Jane.
Thank you. I want to clarify something about what I said and where I'm headed, so you're all forewarned. One of my day jobs is I manage a program here that I got started 25 years ago, I think, for men who are convicted of battering their partners. And it's a 1 year program that abusive men are court mandated to attend. And a whole bunch of that work is around language, the language of violence and the power of our words. And that I have a belief that our words demonstrate our belief system. That's how you express what you believe. And I want to make sure that the words we choose in this resolution, or whatever we call this leading document, that OWEB believes what we wrote, that our board has this belief system, and our staff and the way we do things, and that our words model what our belief is. They show what our belief is. So, that's why we're learning, all of us, a lot about the words we choose and the meaning they have and impact they have on others. And I think Courtney, I so want to take our time and make sure that this is so critical and important. And I don't want it to be like anyone else's. I want it to be ours, and it demonstrates our belief. I want to make sure we all are aligned in our beliefs as much as we can, and that it represents all of us and our work. So thank you for the opportunity to do this and work with all of you on it. And I do want to take our time. And I think, Dan, it's a great idea to put it in front of people to see what impact it has on them and their understanding of it when we're at that point. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Liza Jane. Appreciate that clarification. Other comments, thoughts? Courtney summarized next steps. We understand and acknowledge that this is a journey. It's going to take us time to get it right. It's a way of thinking. Any others? All right, going once, twice.
I have one.
Bruce.
Chris, I miss your Roger Long salmon banner behind you. I always enjoy looking at that when you're on screen. So can you take care of that for the next meeting, please?
I'll do what I can, Bruce. I've been only coming into the office once a week these days, so it is usually my backdrop. Roger's a fantastically fascinating person. Thanks for acknowledging that.
All right. Courtney, Eric, applause everyone. Thanks for your continued work on this. It's a tough lift. It's a heavy lift. So thank you for your perseverance and continued commitment here. I'm sorry, I see Jesse's hand up and a couple others. Bruce.
They're just
I think that's a
applauding.
go. Got you. Not used to Zoom. Okay, I think, Courtney, we're at the place here where we have no public comment in our agenda, right? And
Yep.
we're ready to talk about topics for our next meeting.
Yeah, so a couple things. So our topics that we've identified for the next meeting, and open if there's any additional things to add to this, would be just what Lisa was saying at the beginning, language accessibility, looking at our language use, giving the board an update and talking about where we are on that. Continued update and outreach to new partners, and then continued discussions on the board equity statement. And I've also just captured in my notes, I think this group would be interested in where Ken and OWEB staff are in the tribal training and what that is framing up to look like. And I saw head nods from folks there. The last thing that I had on my list was to ask this committee if the group would be okay with us moving from the first Wednesday of the month, which would be our next meeting and would be the first Wednesday in March, to either the first Tuesday or Thursday of the month. Kelly has to be on the road typically at this time on Monday and Wednesdays. And so would appreciate if we could consider moving this meeting to a Tuesday or Thursday. And so wondering if anyone has any preference for Tuesday or Thursday, or in most boats, is it, a coin toss that it works out and you cross your fingers and toes?
Are you looking for that feedback now, Courtney?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Please.
For me, it's great. Morning is good instead of midday. So I appreciate that. But the day of the week doesn't matter.
It works for me too. I'm flexible.
Okay.
Not too early, Lisa, don't worry, but
We'll stick to the general 8:30.
midday at 8:30 is just fine.
So to clarify, Courtney, Tuesday or Thursday, correct?
Yeah.
Thursdays are bad for me in general.
Okay.
Tuesdays would be preferred. But that
Great.
said, my schedule is off the charts. I'm always having to make adjustments but if folks are open, either way, my preference would probably be the Tuesday.
Okay. I think I heard general didn't matter. So I think we will move to the first Tuesday of the month, and we'll have April update those calendar invites for everybody. So any other agenda items this committee would like to hear about at our March meeting?
This is Kelly. I just want to thank everyone for working with my crazy schedule. Thank you.
You're back. All right.
You never know if I'm on or if I'm not on. It's
I just see iPhone 7.
so
Well,
sorry.
we're just wrapping up, Kelly. It's been a great meeting. Courtney, were there any other finishing items in terms of setting ourselves up for success at our next meeting?
No, I just really appreciate everyone's engagement in this committee. I really look forward to having this meeting and hearing everyone's thoughts and comments and leaning into this equity statement and taking the time to do it well and not rushing it. So thank you. And it's always great to end a few minutes early.
Excellent. With that, any closing comments from any committee members, Liza Jane or Lisa, perhaps last?
Liza Jane, do you have something?
Do I? I think just, happy holidays. I love Santa, so I'm excited.
You got grandkids.
I don't even need, I do, but I finally have partners with Santa. So yeah.
Wonderful.
And I look like Santa and I'm happy.
Lisa, any closing thoughts?
Yeah. So, I want to say thank you to the committee for the work that you're doing. And I hope you're feeling it and seeing it reflected in the work of the staff and what I believe are thoughtful approaches that the agency is taking to working through some of these issues and thinking about how we've done things in the past and the opportunities to improve and make changes for the better for all Oregonians. And I think that really is our eye to many of the things that we're talking about here. And I appreciate, the good conversations that we have here, the additional ideas for places to go and poke and, pull things back and have some hard conversations around. So thank you for that. And on that note, I would end with yes, happy holidays. Be safe, be merry, enjoy your family and friends, and have a wonderful December and early January. And we'll be back together in no time. I'm not even sure of the exact dates for the board meeting, but soon. How's that? Sooner it will come upon us rather quickly. And we're all preparing right now for legislative session, et cetera, and getting ready for the board meeting. So there'll be a lot to talk about in January.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. Happy holidays, everyone. Be safe, be happy. See you sooner in the new year.
Bye, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye, everyone.